right, Orlando, Mordheim campaign, Bordertown burning, campaign day 4. This was a crazy one, to say the least. So, first of all, I got another rock chip driving to Orlando. This will be the second in four trips. The first time shattered my whole windshield, so I had to get a new one. And this one is small enough that I might be able to get a patch job on it. But come on, man! I'm losing more windshields than I am games. That's not actually true. I've now lost, as of today, 3 games. And I'll tell you about that after I first tell you about the siege on the docks of Marienburg. So we've got up to enough campaign points to where Glenn, our fearless leader, decided that we should do the siege of the docks of Marienburg scenario, which is my undead warband, Vivian's crew, basically sails a ship into the docks of Marienburg and lays siege to it. Really, really cool scenario. Narratively, especially. Rules-wise, it needs work. So, what we did was, the scenario is designed as a multiplayer scenario where three or four good guy warbands are actually facing off against basically like an NPC undead army. There's like a named villain that comes eventually, and zombies and dire wolves and a bone Goliath and all these crazy, nasty undead monsters show up throughout the turns. It lasts 8 turns. The undead team does not rout, and the other good guy warbands basically work together to save villagers and defend the center of the town. So Glenn set up a big, I think it was a 6x4 table. One of the short sides was water, where my boat was docked. And the difference in this scenario, obviously, is I'm not an NPC. So I would get the NPC sort of reserves that would come on every turn, and I would get my warband, which my warband comes off the ship. So at the beginning of every turn, there were 4 buildings on fire. So Glenn had to roll for all the fire rules to see if the fire got bigger, to see if it spread to other buildings, to see if the buildings collapsed. It was pretty cool. And then I would roll on this chart to see what types of undead creatures show up. And you roll 2d6, and it gets it has modifiers to it depending on how long the game has progressed. And obviously, the longer the game goes, the more the modifiers, the more likely it is that you get the bigger, badder stuff. With the ultimate goal of getting the final boss, which we don't have one in this campaign, and that leads to one of the major problems with the scenario. I'll talk about that more later. So, we didn't really know how to work these NPCs. So, to start with, we roll 1d6 zombies for each opponent. So I was facing off against 3 guys. Stefan's, they're thieves or something. I forget what they're called. They're like, there's a huckster, the bandits, Hockland bandits. That's what it is. And then there was Carlos playing his Sisters of Sigmar. Beautiful, beautiful warband. They've got white robes with these like turquoise tabards and accents. Just are really, really awesome. I love them. And then Mike was playing dwarf treasure hunters, I think. He was my biggest concern before the game started. So my understanding of how the scenarios was going to go is that I was going to roll on these charts to see what showed up, and then you roll on a separate table, the assault table, to see where they show up. They could show up either from random kind of manhole covers around the board, or they can show up from a random table edge. And some of them, there were Graveguard wights that show up, and they only show up from the sea, so from the side of the docks. So initially I roll up, I don't know, like I think 10 or 12. Actually, no, I think it was only like 8 or 9 zombies. And the good guys also roll to see where their units deploy. Almost all of the Sisters of Sigmar deploy in the center, the town center, which is the defended area. It's surrounded by barricades, the barricades were impassable unless you took an initiative test to climb them. Otherwise, you could break them down. You could attack them. They had toughness 4 and 3 wounds though, so they were not super easy to knock down. Almost his entire warband started in the center. Almost his entire warband has a sling as a backup weapon. So he essentially made a gun line across the barricade that was facing my ship. So that made me nervous seeing that. And then the dwarves, most of them started. I think they were pretty dispersed. I think half started inside. Only one started outside on a table edge, and then he had, I think, 2 or 3 in reserves that came on at the start of turn 2. Stefan's, his guys, almost all of them started on the table edge, and I think he had 1 or 2 that started off the table. So when we roll up the first 3d6 zombies, the guys that start on the table, the good guys that start on the table, actually start in combat with a zombie. So right off the bat, we don't know what to do. The way I interpreted the rules doesn't really matter because we weren't playing the scenario the way it is designed to be played. My interpretation was that the d6 per unit zombies show up as rolled on the assault table, and any of the good guys that start on the table, but outside of the barricade, started in combat with an additional zombie because they were separate. The d6 per guy per warband was in the setup portion of the scenario, and the rolls were in a secondary part, and then it was just really pretty complicated. So what we ended up doing was saying, okay, the 3d6 zombies, of those zombies, I can start them in combat with the guys on the board at my option, and then the remaining ones, which I think there was only 1 or 2, they started at random table edge. So I put 1 in combat with the dwarf that was on a table edge, and then 1 just like an inch away from that dwarf because we didn't have any kind of restrictions on how close they could be set up, which was another issue that I think we need to sort of tweak. And then I had one of the Sisters of Sigmar that started on the table. I started her in combat with a zombie, and then all of Stefan's units, all of his guys that were on the table edge, which there were, I think, 6 of. I put 1 zombie in front of each of them, and that was all I had. So I think it was like 6, 7 with a sister, 8, 9. So I think I started with 9. One of Stefan's guys was an ogre bodyguard, so we started in combat with us. They all started in combat with a zombie. So almost his whole warband was starting the game in combat with a zombie. So the next issue was we didn't know when these NPCs would act. So at first, we were treating it as though they were an addition to my warband. Since I went second, that meant that all of my spawns, if you will, show up, but then don't do anything. They just sit there. And so that quickly became an obvious problem. I think it was turn 2 where it was obvious that this is probably not how this is supposed to go. But regardless, we started off all these zombies in combat, and of course they're zombies, so they go last. But somehow, like right off the rip, I took one of Stefan's guys out of action with one of the zombies that started in combat, and he didn't take a single zombie out. I don't even think he knocked one down. His rolls were abysmal, even with the ogre bodyguard. that combat with those like 6 zombies and bandits, that lasted for like 4 turns. They were just stuck in a line there. I ended up taking out his dwarf troll slayer, hired sword, and one of his regular guys. I'm not sure what it was. I don't recall. I think it was a henchman though. So it was pretty wild how effective that little row of zombies was at holding him back. Meanwhile, my whole warband sort of advanced up. Vivian, of course, turn 1, 18-inch charge. She charged and killed one of the villagers because obviously I want to kill them, and the good guy squads want to rescue them. They can rescue them by escorting them off the table or escorting them into the what they were calling the safe zone, and they were using air quotes whenever they said safe zone because it was obvious that it was not going to be safe for very long. In fact, on the assault table for my NPC undead spawn, if I roll a 6, that particular spawn unit shows up within the barricade. So I was really hoping to get some of that action right away. So back to my misinterpretation of the rules, my expectation was that the D6 per player zombies would start on the table, and then I would roll on that chart to see what actually showed up. And like I said, it's a 2D6 chart, and after every turn, every round that has passed, you add 1 to the dice roll. Well, the very first option on the chart is D6 dire rolls if you roll between a 2 and a 4. So I didn't roll. They said I should not roll on that chart at the start of the game. I didn't really agree with that, but at the same time, I kind of thought that because I was getting these reinforcements, I was going to have a huge upper hand. That was my suspicion. So I was, at the very beginning of the game, I was very, like, whatever, man. You guys do whatever you think is right is fine. I'm kind of concerned that this is going to be a stomp, and I'm not. I don't really like that. Even though it's 3 versus 1, technically, I have the potential for getting a lot of potent reinforcements. And if they roll on the assault chart and end up in the barricades, that's basically how I win. If by turn 8 there are undead creatures inside the barricades, I win, essentially. Glenn did say that he was going to sort of make a judgment call on who wins based on how the game is going at that point, which we all agreed to because we didn't really know how the scenario was going to play out. So, like I said, turn 1, I kill a villager. They take a couple pot shots at me, and I just kind of try to advance up the center and then both flanks. So I've got a couple ghouls and I think all of my dregs, including the dreg with the broadsword of the damned, the chaos artifact that I still have. They sort of went straight left. I don't want to get too close to this sling gun line that they have lined up because I get a feeling it was going to cause real hurt, especially when I get within that 9-inch range and he starts hitting me with 2 shots each turn. So their shooting is relatively ineffectual. Like he knocked the troll. There was a dwarf that was in a tower right next to the Sisters of Sigmar gun line that had a crossbow. He also had 2 wounds, and he also had like a high ballistic skill, and he had gimbal, and he had quick shot. So he was dangerous, but he didn't have a lot of success on. I think it was mostly wounds, generally. So my zombies, they kind of advanced up the middle, including my Skaven zombie with the warp lock pistol. My thinking was he's going to get up close and he's going to start trying to shoot at them over the barricade. And I also took a shot at the guy, the dwarf, on the elevated kind of tower. Didn't do a whole lot, but I tried. The game was really, really slow, really cumbersome, because we had essentially 5 players. There were the 3 good guys, me and my warband, and then the NPCs. I think it was turn 3 or 4. I finally rolled some ghouls on the chart. And it's like, I think it's D3, and I got 3 ghouls. And I rolled a 6 on the assault table, which means they popped up in the middle of the barricades. That is when we realized this is not the right way to do this. Because they pop up in the middle, and then just got charged from every direction and annihilated. I say annihilated, but in fact, actually, I think 2 out of the 3, all 3 survived the first round of combat. Only one of them, I think, was even stunned or knocked down. But by the second round of combat, in that same turn, one got killed, and then, or 2, I think 2 went out of action, and then I think it was the one turn later, or maybe 1.5 turns later, the final ghoul fell. But that was just because their rolls were atrocious. They really all struggled to wound pretty badly. I mean, they rolled snake eyes a bunch of times. It was kind of shocking, and a lot of them only needed like twos or threes to hit and wound, and they just could not string them together. It was really pretty wild. That's how this game is. I mean, the dice can wreck you. So when we realized that, okay, every NPC that's spawning is essentially dying immediately because they're getting charged and chopped up. They're showing up danger close right in the middle of a whole warband, and then getting destroyed. To the point where I didn't really have any of the NPCs showing up or staying on the board for very long. And when it's essentially 3 versus 1 otherwise, that's kind of tough. Especially when I have to get to the middle of the board to even have a chance of winning. Which means I had to get over the barricades and the inside through all those guys. And plus, there were special rules for the barricades that you could actually fight over the barricades at a -1 to hit for both sides. So getting there was going to be tough. So what Glenn ultimately decided to do was treat the NPCs as they arrived as an actual sort of separate NPC entity, just like you would with the NPCs for the random encounters, where they show up, you figure out what shows up, you figure out where it shows up, and then it acts immediately. And so we switched to that, which I think worked. I think at least it made more sense. It was a little easier to do, and it was more fair until we got to the point where I start to roll more dice on the chart to see who shows up and when, and get modifiers to some of those dice rolls. So normally you roll 2d6 on the chart to see what shows up. And then after turn 3, I roll on the chart twice. After turn 5, I roll on the chart 3 times. And this is the start of every round. As if that weren't bad enough, well, actually, that wouldn't be bad. If that was how it worked, I think it actually would probably have been a more balanced game. Again, it totally depends on the dice, but just having 2 or 3 rolls on that chart would have probably been fine. The problem came in where after every round that has passed, add 1 to the total dice roll. So pretty much immediately, I couldn't even get dire wolves, which is supposed to be the first thing on the list, which usually the lowest thing on the list is the worst, but D6 dire rolls is kind of really strong. So, I guess that sort of doesn't apply to this chart. But for example, to get the Bone Goliath, I need to roll a 12, or 11 or 12. But to get the final guy who we didn't even have, you had to get like a 13. So I screwed that up. And sorry, I'm driving home and I missed my exit. So fun. Where was I? All right, so the bonus modifiers to the dice roll to see what shows up. So the other thing is when you roll max on the list, which I started rolling pretty well. So I think it was turn 4. I think it was turn 4. I rolled the Bone Goliath, which I was really excited about because I painted up one of the old world spells is like this huge kind of spectral caped skeletal giant, and that was Glenn's model, and it was unpainted, so he gave it to me to paint up. So I painted it. I threw some LEDs in it and made it really. I thought it was pretty awesome. Everybody seemed to enjoy it. It was just big and scary and monstrous and glowy with green kind of OSL effects and stuff. So pretty fun model to paint. And overall, I was pretty happy with it. So anyway, he came out pretty early, but then it became apparent, especially rolling twice on this list, that I was gonna do nothing but roll really high every time. And so, and on top of that, if you roll on the chart the highest you can roll, which with all the modifiers I was doing pretty much every time, it also provides for 2 additional rolls on the chart. So it got to the point where it was going to pretty much end up as infinite rolls on the chart, where it was, it was turn 5 is +4 to 2d6. And, I was also rolling, 8s, 9s, 10s. So that resulted in 2 additional rolls with the modifiers, and one of those was usually over the chart, which rolled the 2 additional rolls. And it got to the point where at first it was like, I guess I'm putting down 2 more Bone Goliaths, and one of them showed up in the middle of the board. And so I was like, now wait a second. That seems ridiculous. Let's not do that. So we switched out the Bone Goliaths, and we said instead, Glenn decided that instead of getting the highest, I can't get any more Bone Goliaths, I can just pick from the chart what I want. And we stopped rolling the additional. I stopped rolling the additional rolls anyway because I felt like it's getting ridiculous. So I basically just stuck with the number of rolls I should have gotten based on the turns. So I was only rolling 3 times on the chart at the end instead of 3 times plus 2 times plus 2 times, however many times I got that. Do you follow me? Essentially, I'm summoning all these undead creatures, and it got wild. So I started to kind of nerf myself, and also Glenn stepped in and said, we're only going to get, you could pick what you want instead of, and you can't get the Bone Goliath and I also decided I shouldn't get the Necromancer anymore because the Necromancer came out, did nothing, died immediately. And I thought that Necromancer comes with 2 spells, and one of them was Call of Van Hell, which allows not only for an additional movement for any direwolf, zombie, or graveguard unit, but it also meant that it would automatically pass any initiative text with me, which means on a 6-up, which is on 2d6, which is what the spell costs, that's its difficulty. I could basically get any zombie or undead creature other than the Bone Goliath inside the barricade because it automatically would pass its initiative test to climb over. And I felt like if I did that, that would be kind of busted because as long as I have one, a guy in there, they can't win. So there was a lot of adjustments to the rules, both by Glenn and also by me of my own accord to kind of nerf it a little bit. The Graveguard units, like I said, when I rolled those up, they come from the sea. But they can't run, so they only move 4 inches. So I think I had 4 of them in total, and none of them saw combat. One of them eventually saw combat, and that's only because Stefan's bandits finally decided to kill those zombies, and they could do something, and they charged into them and cut them all up. By turn 6, I was on the barricade. In the meantime, Vivian has ran completely around the barricade, trying to kill everybody she can. She cut down a dwarf, and then she just got charged left, right, and center. And Vivian is real bad. But she's really especially bad when she's doing the charging. So when she charges, she rerolls misses. She gets +1 to hit. She gets additional attacks if she's in combat with more than one opponent. That happens whether she charges or not. But getting her to charge is really important. And I did not get to charge. I think I only charged with her once, and then the rest of the time, she was just getting charged every turn. She's getting charged by something. She ended up killing a lot of guys. She lost a wound at one point to a shooting attack, but I got it back because I had the healing herbs that I found at one point, and she just was a survivor. I mean, the only reason that she, I think, ultimately survived that battle is that the ogre bodyguard that wanted to charge her was blocked from doing so by the downed dwarf was blocking a door. If it weren't for that ogre got to charge her, that probably would have changed the game. If he probably would have gone out of action. Unless I got really lucky with my saves and my parries. She has 2 swords, but she gets parry and a reroll. But she also has this campaign bonus, which allows her to parry by rolling equal to or higher than the hit roll. So she's got an advantage of parrying there over most others. Luckily for me, towards the end of the game, I ended up with, I think it was like 6 dire rolls total showing up. That really is what changed the pace of the game. I know my opponents probably felt more strongly that the Bone Goliath was the bigger deal, but frankly, the Bone Goliath, all it did was kill 1 Dwarf Troll Slayer, who charged it, by the way. That was the only thing that it accomplished. Those dire rolls, though, they tied up a whole bunch of people. They killed the Mike's Road Warden, who was otherwise going to probably wreck Vivian. He was at charge range, mounted, had like a 2+ save. He was real tough, but you got charged by 2 dogs, knocked down, and then Judah. They also, one of the wolves managed to help Vivian out. She was attacked by multiple guys. That wolf got in there and helped dispense one of them. And then the other, I think it was 3 on the left flank, they sort of helped slow down the bandits more. So turn 7, I basically have a line of undead, mostly zombies, but a couple drags, or 1 drag rather, up against the barricade that was closest to the sea. And I had 3 ghouls in combat. 3 ghouls rolling their 2 attacks each. Even though that it was 3 wounds, toughness 4, they managed to break down the barricade. That was the end of the game, because as soon as that barricade came down, everything I had charged through the opening, got into close combat, chopped some people up really badly, and ultimately I ended up in the middle with a whole mess of undead. And at the end of turn 7, Glenn said, let's just call this, because otherwise it's going to get real brutal real fast. And he was right. I mean, I was about to wipe out probably the remaining Sisters of Sigmar, who there weren't very many left, and probably some of the dwarves too. A couple funny things happened. So for one, my necromancer did what he always does, which is almost nothing. He ran up the middle and got tucked behind a wall, and he continually tried to do the lifesteal spell against the dwarf that was in the tower with the quick shot nimble crossbow. The very first roll I have scribe, so I had a +2 to the first roll. I also have sorcery, so that's +1. So it's +3 to my first roll, and I rolled an 11. The one time I naturally roll what I would need to pass that spell, which is a 10. It's a 10 up roll. And I caused 1 wound. Fortunately, it had 2 wounds. The rest of the game, that necromancer sat there casting that spell, and failing miserably. Until I think it was the second to last turn, cast it successfully, but only managed to knock him down. It didn't fall out of the tower, even with his 3 initiative. And then I think at the very last turn, he was successful again and actually managed to take him out of action. Which was, I celebrated too hard. I didn't mean to. I just had been trying to do this one thing the entire game and finally did it. So it's very exciting for me. And by that point, the necromancer, I think, got 3 wounds because he sucked the life out of this dwarf so many times. That was pretty silly. One sort of unfortunate thing that happened was one of the Graveguard showed up turn 2. And as I said, they don't run. So he moves 4 inches straight ahead. And it took forever for her to get anywhere near the dwarves that were on that side. But when we switched to the NPCs taking their own turn, so when they show up, the NPCs would act, then all the good guys would go, then my warband would go. That white had been going with my warband, and so he kind of got an extra turn. And that irritated Mike. He was pretty upset with it, because it basically meant that the Graveguard was able to get into combat with one of his guys when that guy was about to charge somebody. On the one hand, yes, it sort of was a little unfair because it basically meant that my guy got an additional 4-inch move that he really shouldn't have gotten. Or I guess he charged what he wouldn't have otherwise been able to, because presumably the dwarf was going to charge somebody else. Ultimately, it did make a difference. The Graveguard didn't do anything; he just died. But it was to balance the fact that I had rolled really awesome on both the unit chart and the assault chart. I had 3 ghouls show up inside the barricade, and that should have been much more of a fight. And it wasn't. They showed up and they pretty much immediately died. 3 ghouls. It took I think a turn and a half, maybe 2 turns tops. I think that's too much. I think it was just a turn and a half for them. They were gone so quick. It seemed like they weren't even there. And so, it was sort of a balance change to the game, but resulted in like a slight unfairness to Mike, but really just for that one unit. And even for that one unit, it didn't really change anything, because that unit ultimately did get to charge my vampire and ultimately got the death he deserved and wanted. So it didn't really change anything. Other silliness that occurred, well, I'd already told you that the necromancer NPC that spawned failed Call of Van Hell, failed his other spell, and immediately got shot dead. That was kind of super anticlimactic. Same with the ogre bodyguard that Carlos had. He stuck it inside one of the corners inside the barricades, which I was pretty nervous that they started with an ogre in the middle, because I knew that was going to be tough, a tough nut to crack when I have to get in the middle. But unfortunately, he placed him nowhere near a door or exit to the barricade, so he kind of didn't do a whole lot until my ghouls showed up in the middle, and then he charged. And again, their rolling was really, really bad. I think overall, this game, we modified the rules as we played. We should have played a test game, but obviously this is not a game you can really do a test game with, especially considering I don't live in Orlando. And so that kind of made it a little wonky, but really, and I get a lot of guff. Look, listen, I have a vampire in Mordheim who had started the game today with 58 experience. This is a long-running campaign. My entire focus for my faction is to get my vampire more experience. It's the only way that I really get campaign points. So not only is she, need to focus on getting kills, but experience is like her goal, even more than normal. So she's tough. 58 experience on an already incredibly tough unit in the game means that she's tough. So there's a real the optics, let's say, are that my warband is incredibly powerful, but just because of Vivian. When Vivian's gone out of action in three now 3 games, she is killable. You just got to do it right, and it is a challenge. That 18-inch charge is tough, but they did things right in this game. They should have taken her out of action, but their positioning was off. The fact that the ogre bodyguard was inside the barricades and couldn't get to Vivian, that was a huge problem. The fact that the dwarves, they all move away from the barricades in the middle. He started in the middle, and he moved them all away because he wanted to escort out the villagers, which is a goal, but it's a secondary goal to me. To me, winning the game is the goal. You win the game by keeping me out of the middle, and he took all the toughest units and he basically left the middle to rescue it. Because of that, I had a much easier time getting in. If he had kept his dwarves protecting the middle, I don't think it would have gone the way it went. But the biggest reason that the game went the way it did, I can't say it was for anything other than their terrible rolling. Their rolls were so awful. I mean, there were so many rounds of combat where zombies wouldn't die. I mean, without exaggerating, I'm pretty certain that it took 5 full turns for Stefan's warband to actually get away from the initial 6 zombies that showed up. 6 zombies. Weapon skill 2, toughness 3. Fear irrelevant because they started in combat, so we didn't even have a fear check. And they just kept rolling 1s and 2s, 3s where 3 was a failure. The dwarves, they finally got in combat with Vivian. He rolled Snake Eyes. He has a, I think it's a Doom Slayer, he called it. The thing was gnarly. It automatically wounds anything on a 4+. And he kept rolling Snake Eyes. Like, it's hard to win this game if the dice don't go your way. I think that's ultimately what lost it for them. The dice rolling. Secondarily, I think the strategy. I think had the dwarves stayed in the middle and defended the middle instead of trying to save the townsfolk, which saving the townsfolk, the hero that saves them just gets an experience point. That's it. That wasn't really an objective or a mission for them. The mission was protect the middle, and they didn't focus on that. They focused on the villagers, and then of course Stefan gets basically excluded from the middle because first of all his whole warband got placed on the table edge, and then second of all because they could kill 6 zombies, so that was pretty tough. I had a lot of undead units show up, but I think it was a total of maybe about 12 zombies that showed up, and they killed all of them. So they should have gotten a ton of experience, but they also had a lot of henchmen get the kills, so that doesn't help. The direwolves that showed up, they did some work, but most of them just got killed, and they were also locked in combat for a really long time. Another sort of silly thing that happened is the fire. So the fires almost went out pretty quickly because they collapsed a bunch of the buildings right away. And when they collapse, they basically go out. But the fire did spread to a building that the bandits were practically surrounding. And if you're within 2 inches of a burning building, you take D3, like strength 3 or 4 hits or something like that. It was dangerous. And it was only if you started the turn there. Well, the building caught on fire, and he was up against the wall, and he was in combat with these direwolves. And then the ones that weren't in combat, I think they weren't able to actually get away from the building. So the fire itself, I think, took one of his guys out and hurt another one. So that was really tough too. The sling gun line was a really, really good idea. but he just Carlos just needed a lot of 5s and 6s to hit. And if you need a 5 or a 6, you may as well just sit back and wait for close combat, because he couldn't roll a 5 or 6 to save his life. It seemed like the slings were practically useless, and he had a lot of them. I mean, he had I think it was 6 guys with slings along the barricades and 1 up in a tower. That was another I think kind of a strategy error, was having the ranged guys not having one of the crossbowmen was in one of the towers, but it was kind of on the far side of the barricades, far from my ship. So that guy didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to shoot at, the better targets. If I were them, I would have done everything I could to turtle up in that middle, and then try to do everything I can to target Vivian, because if they killed the vampire, then they win automatically. And they just, because the dwarves moved out, she had really light work to do to get up against the barricades, up against one of the buildings, one of the doors, and they didn't have enough concentration on that side. Also, when it would Vivian ran up to the, let's call it the northeast corner of the barricades, and then let's say the ship, the docks that I came from was the south side. She went the long way around and went to the opposite corner. They didn't shift any of their units in that direction to target her. The dwarves tried to, but they had already moved away from the barricades, so they had to try to move back, and I think more than half of them actually didn't end up getting into combat with her because they were just too far away. And the ones that did get into combat with her were like 1 or 2 at a time. And if you're going to come at my vampire 1 or 2 at a time, you may as well just take them off the board 1 or 2 at a time, because they're not going to survive, most likely. So I think that was sort of where they went wrong. But even, it's really a tough call to make. This game was a lot of fun, but it was so arduous because of all the extra rules, and because we essentially had 4 human players and an NPC, and technically the fire was practically taking its own turn. I think that game did not end until after 3 o'clock. They started at, I think, about 11. That's a long game in Mordheim, man. Wow. But ultimately, I ended up victorious. As I said, Glenn decided, let's end it at turn 7, which was certainly the right call to make. Otherwise, I was gonna mulch their warbands. Now, I say it was the right call to make because I was gonna mulch some stuff, but in fairness, if it did go to turn 8, the ogre bodyguard and the other dwarves probably would have been able to charge the vampire. And if all of them were able to charge the vampire, I do not think she would have survived. She only had 1 wound. She does have really good armor, but with that many people charging her, there were certainly going to be some 6s, so no saves allowed, without question. But, it went the way it did. They were, Mike's dwarves were going to rout. He said he was going to rout anyway, turn 8, because he had lost a significant amount. The Sisters of Sigmar, they took the most losses. He lost most of his warband, but he kept passing his rout checks, and then, towards the end, here's another point of mention. At one point, there's a troll slayer up against the barricade that got charged by, I think it was a zombie. Actually, it might have been Skaven zombie with the halberd and better weapon skill. And a direwolf showed up in the middle and was going to charge him from behind. And Carlos intercepted the charge with one of his Sisters of Sigmar. One of his weak ones, too, by the way. I'm pretty sure it's the what I'm going to tell you about in a minute. And he should not have done that. Like, he did that to save a dwarf. Wasn't even on his team. Knowing that he was probably going to get chopped up, and knowing that he had already lost the majority of his warband, probably should have just routed. But he wanted to stick it in. He wanted to fight as a team. I really commend him for that. I think those are the types of plays that you call in this game if you're really about that wartime life. You know, like, that's in character for the Sisters of Sigmar. Fight to the last woman. Save your allies. You know, do right. Fight evil. I love that. I love seeing stuff like that. Even though it's strategically the wrong play to make. I do stuff like that. I take my vampire diving charges off 2-story buildings when he doesn't even, I needed 2 to hit anyway. It doesn't even make a difference. I just want to do it. And it takes me out of the game sometimes. So, you know, playing thematically to me is where it's at. So I commend him for doing that. That said, it was one of his brand new novices who had gotten a couple advancements, who had gotten an advancement, and a lad's got talent. And that hero, like I said, took the charge, intercepted the charge, and died for it. And then died for real in the postgame, which means she is now mine, thanks to the Spell of Awakening. So I have gained a new zombie, a Sisters of Sigmar zombie. She's got a flail and a sling. Stats are pretty average, but I think her increase was to weapon skill, so that's kind of nice. And she has 2 attacks, so that's excellent. A zombie with 2 attacks and a flail, thank you very much. And a sling, awesome. Very excited to use those. More exciting than that is I get to now paint a Sisters of Sigmar zombie with this beautiful color scheme that Carlos had. So I'm very excited to do that. And in fact, I have very same turquoise that he used. So I'm looking forward to that modeling opportunity. Post game was really weird. So because it was this Marienburg siege, it meant that whomever won basically gets to go to Marienburg for free. So I got to go to Marienburg for free, and in the Border Town Burning campaign, going to Marienburg normally costs campaign points and gold, and because I won the battle, I got a couple discounts, and Glenn already allowed us to have basically double the rolls. So if it's like a 2d6 roll, you actually get 2d6 twice. And if it's a 1d6 roll, you get to roll it twice, and you pick whichever one you want. So it took a long time. There's so many options of places you could visit in Marienburg, and all of them have like really bad consequences potentially, and not a lot of upside. So I ended up going to a few places. I got a compass. For all my troubles, I got a compass, and the only good thing I got, which is actually an incredibly good thing, all things considered, was that Vivian got some benefit that allowed her to not suffer any permanent injuries if she goes out of action the next game. So I was like, great, that means next game I can go wild with her, and she'll be fine. So all this is done by it's almost 4 o'clock. I think it's 4 o'clock. And, you know, had I not driven 2 hours to get there, I would have just gone home. But since I had, I was like, I really ought to play more than one game for driving all this way for a campaign day. Also knowing that the next campaign day, I'm out of town, so I won't be able to make it. So Glenn and Kevin decided that it would be fair for them to both fight me. And I said, you know what? I took a pretty strong victory here. I've taken quite a few victories. Let's do it. You know, and also knowing that Vivian, if she If she goes out of action, she's not going to suffer a permanent injury. Fine. Like, well, why not? Now, again, and I do this to myself fairly often. I did something knowing that it was ultimately going to hurt me because Kevin was playing Shadow Warriors with longbows, hunting arrows, quick shots, like just really, really tough warband to face. Only 8 guys. One of them was an ogre bodyguard. But, gonna be tough for me to face as an all melee warband. And then Glenn was rocking his pirates, who had lots of range, lots of crossbows, lots of blunderbusses. So I knew how this game was going to go. And again, like I said, I could afford to replace everything that I needed to replace. Most likely, I have a bunch of unspent weird stone. And Vivian, if she gets injured, she's not going anywhere. So why not? Let's do it. I kind of hurried into getting into this game, though. And so because of that, I didn't get any hired swords, which I certainly should have, because I have my max warband size is 15, and I'm at 15. So I definitely need to get some hired swords at this point. And I just didn't. I didn't think to do it. And I also forgot that they didn't count towards your maximum size. I didn't remember that I got this Sisters of Sigmar's on me, so I didn't even field her. I completely forgot that I made the next level of my campaign points, which gave all my heroes +1 to hit on the charge. And I charged with all my heroes a bunch of times. Totally forgot all that. And this game, the rolls were quite different than the first game. So, turn 1, between the two of them, I think they took 3 or 4 shots, and all 3 or 4 resulted in an out of action. Very first shot of the game was killing my necromancer and ricochet to my dog, which luckily didn't. Whoa, still, it was kind of scary. Necromancer out of action right away. And then I had, like I said, 2 or 3 more guys go out of action. The first turn, before I even got to act. Second turn was the same story. They kept rolling 5s and 6s. They kept hitting and putting me out of action. They didn't need very much to hit, and plus with quick shot, it didn't really matter. They taking a whole bunch of shots at me and hitting and causing wounds that would go out of action right away. So by the time that I got into close combat, I already had, I think, 5 units out of action. Including my necromancer and one of my dregs. So Vivian gets a couple kills off the rip, because that's what she does. And then she gets charged by the Shadow Warriors Ogre Bodyguard. I just did not position myself well this game. This was the opposite of the first game. I had terrible strategy and terrible rolls, and it really reflected the results. And their rolls were just really outstanding. Those, especially the fact that by turn 2, the start of turn 2, my turn 2, I had I think 4 or 5 guys out of action, and I had to use my unholy relic at my second turn. That's tough. My ghouls couldn't hit anybody, and when they did, it was only the pirates. I don't think I got into combat with any of the Shadow Warriors except for the Ogre Bodyguard, because they were all at the other end of the table, and we're all up high and taking shots at me the whole time. Zombies got taken out pretty quickly, and then Vivian, I think she took out 2 pirates before facing the ogre, and then took 1 more pirate out of action, who was in combat with her with the ogre, and the ogre ended up taking her out of action. They also rolled a lot of critical hits. I mean, it was really pretty insane. So they took Vivian out of action, and sure enough, just for fun, I rolled an lasting injury chart, and it was a 13. So she would have died if it weren't for that Marienburg find that she had. I forgot what it was called. Oh, she went to the fortune teller, and I think it was like Bright Outlook, something like that. So at that point, I had to route because I only had, I think, 4 guys left on the board. And one of them was the guy that had the broadsword of the damned, and I knew if I lose that, that's silliness. So I routed, rolled lasting injuries. All my lasting injuries were good except for the drag that went out of action. It was Vilgo. Vilgo was, as far as drags go, he wasn't bad. I think he had strength 5. He had an increase, and he had strong. Not strong, man. The skill that gives you +1 strength in close combat. I forget what it's called. And he died a permanent death. My necromancer ended up getting a level and increasing his toughness. And the injury that he took was hardened, so that's pretty cool. Now he's immune to fear, which, that was a big difference in this game versus the first game. So in the first game, the Sisters of Sigmar, their campaign path, the point that Carlos had reached, made his entire warband immune to fear. So that's kind of like a big deal, because that's one of the reasons that the Undead warband is strong, is because of fear. And really, look, guys, anybody who complains about fear in the game of Mordheim, there are ways around it. If you're not going to use ranged, get Bugman's Ale. Bugman's Ale is going to make your warband immune, and you can do whatever you want to do. And it's not that expensive. Also, garlic is a thing. You guys should be buying garlic. It's cheap. Everybody should have it. Everybody. All the heroes should have garlic. I don't know why nobody has garlic. It doesn't make any sense to me. Plus, by the way, garlic burns my unholy relic. So, that's pretty helpful too. The exploration, because I only had 2 heroes remaining on the board, exploration was abysmal. There was nothing. I think I got 12 gold from a jewel sword dagger. And I think maybe 2 weird stuff, 2 or 3. So I didn't lose any henchmen, which was very lucky, because all of my, the ones that I remembered to bring, all of my converted zombies, the heroes that I got from Spell of Awakening, so Creepy Jenny and Trin, the Skaven adept engineer with the Warplock pistol and halberd, they both went on action, and luckily for me, they both survived. But Vilgo the Drag is dead, which I don't care. Drags are expendable to me. I've mentioned this in previous editions of this campaign discussion, that Drags, Youngbloods, the cheap heroes that every warband gets, they should be treated as expendable. They gain experience and levels really quickly. They're super cheap, and they're crummy. So let them die and buy a new one. Sure, you don't get the exploration, but that's not as big of a deal as some people will make it out to be. Unless, of course, you're broke, your warband's broke, then it sucks. I agree. But even if you're broke, I think a drag is only 20 gold. That's not a lot. For a hero, it's pretty cheap. So I get to replace that drag for cheap. I'll outfit him cheap, and he'll fill an exploration dice. That's really his only purpose, because in this campaign especially, the only thing that matters to my Vanguard, she's got to get the experience, and she's got to get the levels, because she's the one that's got to fight. So all in all, second game was really tough. It was a fast game. We finished really quickly, but it was tough for me. The other thing is, we played on the same board that we did for the first game, and in the first game there really was not. In this board, essentially, there was not a lot of big terrain. There's a ton of scatter terrain, which is fine for cover, but not very good for hiding, especially when all of the big buildings were still set up on the outer edges of the board. The middle of the board had like no big buildings. So, kind of tough for an all melee gang against all what's it called? All ranged. And I think that was kind of why I didn't really have much of a chance in this game, other than the fact that it was 2 versus 1. And even though the Shadow Warriors only had 8 guys, they were all ranged. They were all set up in the top of buildings, except for 3 of them off to the side. And the Pirates looked maxed out. I think they were probably a full board of 12 or 15, however many they get max. And they were all pretty kitted out with all the blunderbusses and crossbows. So yeah, not being able to go into buildings to get block line of sight, to not have buildings in the middle that would block higher lines of sight, like the guys that were in elevated positions. They had almost free reign of the board. That really limited where I could go and be even somewhat safe. But it just like the first game, it came down to the rolls. My rolls were pretty bad. I can't tell you how many times I had ghouls. I had 2 ghouls charge a single pirate, and they both ended up dying. Like I kept rolling 1s and 2s. They hit. But my bad rolls were nothing compared to their excellent rolls. I mean, the number of crits and out of action, especially they're rolling on the injury chart. I mean, there was one point in the game where I looked at the board and they had only out of out of 8 injury rolls that they made, 5 of them were out of action. That was the first 8 injury rolls, 5 were out of action. And actually the first 5 injury rolls, in the first 4 or the first 5 were all out of action. That's scary to witness. But it was still a lot of fun. A really strategic, sort of fast-paced game, even though it was 3 players. I mean, when you've got, I think I talked about this last time, when you've got 3 guys that all know the rules pretty well, the game could be fast. And this one was pretty quick. So overall, campaign-wise, I'm still really doing really well. I've got, I think, 27 campaign points, so I probably have the most after today. I had the most they ended today. And I've got that. I hit that next level of the campaign bonus, which is all of my heroes get +1 to hit on the charge, which is pretty awesome. I got a new hero zombie, the sister zombie, which I'm very excited about the modeling I get to do for that. And I think I've got to sort of evaluate where I'm going to start, or what hired swords I need to start adding on. I think I got to add an ogre bodyguard to get some extra beef on my squad. And I'm going to look around and see what else I could get. I didn't realize it, but this particular campaign allows the witch, so I might try to get her. I have a witch that I've modeled up. I just never finished painting, and I really like the model, so it's actually the driver of the old world, or I guess original Warhammer corpse cart. I sort of converted her and gave her a a staff that has kind of like a bolt of energy flying out of it. So I might try to find a witch and see if I can get her, because she's incredibly powerful. And most campaigns ban the witch as a hired sword, uh, because of how strong she could be. But you know, Glenn Glenn likes her and says she's allowed, and also he thinks it's not as powerful because you have to roll to get it. You can't just automatically hire her, so I kind of get that. That makes sense to me. Uh, so yeah, that pretty much sums up the day. Again, awesome, uh, awesome games, lots of fun. Again, great guys. Everybody there has a really good attitude. Uh, there was a little bit of frustration in our first game, but I think it was okay. You know, when you're in a game that's got that many moving parts and is that convoluted and complex, and rules get changed mid game, it can be kind of frustrating. I could see being on the receiving end of that and not really liking it. Um, I kind of initially felt like it was going to be a blowout, and then when we started playing, I realized, oh man, I don't have the advantage that I think I have. And then we changed it, and I got more of an advantage. And then I started rolling crazy, and then we realized, oh wait, this is a snowball effect on the rolling tables. That's going to be kind of tough to overcome. And so, it was just one of those games, a little tougher, a little more difficult. But ultimately, I enjoyed it. I had fun. I enjoyed the second game, even though I got wrecked. And I can't wait. I can't wait for next time. I'm gonna miss the next one. So I'm gonna have to do some makeup games. So we'll see when I can squirrel that away. Get that done.